Overtry is fought in the mind. Uncle Ruckus from the Boondocks is one of the most outrageous characters ever written for television. He is spiteful, self-hating, and shamelessly devoted to ideas that degrade him and his own people. On the surface, it's all comedy, a satirical figure created to provoke laughter and disbelief. But hidden inside his rants and ridiculous behavior is something that actually deserves deeper reflection. Uncle Ruckus represents a mindset, one that quietly explains why some people never escape poverty. His character shows how belief systems can chain people down even when opportunities exist all around them. And that is exactly what we'll be breaking down today. Before we continue, make sure you hit that subscribe button. On this channel, we uncover the deeper truths hidden in media and culture. Truths that reveal not just entertainment, but reflections of our lives and struggles. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribing is the best way to stay connected. Now, let's get into it. Uncle Ruckus is not simply a loud character full of outrageous claims. He embodies a mindset where poverty develops long before money is even involved. Why? Because his entire life is built on self-hatred. He denies his identity, insists on a fictional disease that supposedly turned him black, and praises whiteness as if it were divine. At face value, it's all satire. But beneath that, it is a sharp commentary on how internalized hate becomes the first step in staying broke. When a person believes they are not worth much, every chance to grow feels impossible. Self-hatred is one of the deepest barriers to wealth because it attacks the foundation of ambition. Ruckus makes no effort to improve his condition. It's not because opportunities never appear, but because he is convinced he is unworthy of them. And that way of thinking is not unique to him. Entire generations have been conditioned to believe their worth is small, that success belongs to others, and that the safest choice is to settle. Once that belief becomes part of a person's identity, they begin to block their own path forward before they ever take the first step. Psychologists describe this as learned helplessness, a state where repeated rejection convinces people to stop trying. For Ruckus, this helplessness affects his entire worldview. He sees no point in effort because, to him, failure is inevitable. He mocks ambition, ridicules his own people, and turns despair into a source of pride. On the surface, it plays as comedy, but beneath the humor lies a serious truth. Poverty is not only material, it is mental, and the chains of the mind can be tighter than any prison. This is why self-respect is the starting point of wealth. Money can be taken, jobs can be lost, and markets can crash. But the one resource that fuels recovery is the belief that you are capable of more. People with that inner foundation keep pushing when the world pushes back. People without it collapse even when doors are open in front of them. Uncle Ruckus represents the latter. His hate for himself blinds him to every possibility. The tragedy is that self-hatred often comes from trauma passed down. In the series, we see how Ruckus's parents plant those seeds in him, convincing him that whiteness is purity and blackness is curse. That same generational cycle exists outside fiction too. Families scarred by oppression sometimes pass along broken views of worth without realizing it. What begins as survival in a cruel system turns into teaching children that they are lesser, and that belief echoes across lifetimes. Ruckus exaggerates this cycle, but he also explains it. His entire being is proof that when people internalize hate, they live as if they are cursed. They become their own gatekeepers. They lock themselves out of opportunity. Poverty becomes permanent, not because of lack of talent, but because of lack of belief. And that is why his character forces us to confront a truth few want to admit: the first battle against. Now, if self-hatred is the seed of poverty, loyalty to oppression is the water that keeps it alive. Uncle Ruckus doesn't just despise himself, he praises the very structures that despise him. He treats whiteness as sacred, calls slavery a blessing, and constantly claims that life would be better if he could erase who he is. This is satire at its sharpest, but it also reflects a grim reality. People can be so conditioned by the systems that harm them that they end up defending those systems, even while suffering under them. Ruckus takes pride in being obedient. He believes survival comes from submission. When we see him cheer for punishment, mock protest, or even argue against freedom, he is revealing a psychological pattern that plays out in real communities. People internalize the idea that safety comes from compliance, not resistance. They choose to accept unfair wages, harsh conditions, or demeaning treatment because they believe rocking the boat will only make things worse. It is survival logic turned into a permanent worldview. This loyalty has a cost. When people are taught that authority is always right, they stop questioning whether authority is just. That mindset blocks progress. It convinces workers that exploitation is normal. It convinces families that generational poverty is inevitable. It convinces entire communities that asking for better is dangerous. Uncle Ruckus clings to this mindset with desperation, and the result is that he lives his life as a servant, proud of chains that were never meant to break for him. We see this in everyday financial life as well. Some defend payday loans, credit traps, or jobs that barely pay because those systems feel familiar. Others repeat slogans about hard work being the only path, even when the numbers show that the playing field is stacked against them. This isn't stupidity, it's conditioning. Once people have been taught that the system is unshakable, they would rather believe in the fairness of oppression than face the terror of realizing it was never fair to begin with. For Ruckus, this loyalty provides identity. He is not just a man struggling to survive. He is a man who feels valuable when he enforces the rules of those above him. In this sense, he reflects another poverty trap, the search for dignity through servitude. Some people build their self-worth on how well they can follow, rather than how well they can lead or create. It feels safer to guard someone else's door than to try to build your own house. Ruckus teaches us a painful lesson. It is possible to be so devoted to an oppressive system that you defend it more fiercely than those who benefit from it. That is the trap of worshiping the chains. Poverty is preserved not only by those who design the system, but by those who keep it alive with their loyalty. Another important thing to notice is that Uncle Ruckus is never part of a community. He distances himself from Black people, mocks their struggles, and even insists he is unrelated to them whenever he introduces himself. This rejection is not just a character quirk. It reflects another reason why poverty persists: isolation. People who cut themselves off from their community cut themselves off from support, knowledge, and opportunity. Ruckus embodies this isolation so fully that he becomes a warning sign of what happens when a person decides to survive alone in a world designed to keep them at the bottom. Community has always been one of the strongest defenses against poverty. Families, neighbors, and networks pool resources, share skills, and build collective strength. History shows that marginalized people survive the harshest conditions by relying on each other. But for someone like Ruckus, community is an enemy. He sees connection as weakness. He convinces himself that mocking his peers elevates him. The truth is the opposite. His refusal to stand with others leaves him powerless, and that mirrors what happens in reality when people abandon the bonds that make progress possible. The financial system is not built for individuals to thrive alone. Success often requires collaboration, whether it's learning from mentors, building cooperative ventures, or joining movements that demand fair treatment. Isolated individuals have little leverage. They are easier to exploit, easier to ignore, and easier to discard. Ruckus highlights this vulnerability. By rejecting his community, he strips himself of any shield against the structures he idolizes. His only defense becomes obedience, and obedience keeps him poor. Isolation also damages perspective. Ruckus has no mirror to check his own delusion. He surrounds himself only with his own bitterness, so he grows more extreme. This mirrors the way financial isolation can distort reality. When people have no peers to compare strategies, no advisors to offer alternatives, and no community to share experiences, they normalize their own suffering. They convince themselves that struggle is natural, that debt is unavoidable, and that wealth is something other people have. Without exposure to collective wisdom, they repeat cycles that keep them broke. This is why solidarity is so dangerous to oppressive systems. When people unite, they discover patterns. They realize their problems are not personal failures, but structural barriers. They recognize that change is possible when numbers are on their side. That recognition builds power. But when people like Ruckus ridicule unity, the system is safe. His hostility toward his own community is more than comic. It is a sharp critique of how division starves the poor of their only real weapon: togetherness. The financial system is not built for individuals to thrive alone. Success often requires collaboration, whether it's learning from mentors, building cooperative ventures, or joining movements that demand fair treatment. Isolated individuals have little leverage. They are easier to exploit, easier to ignore, and easier to discard. Ruckus highlights this vulnerability. By rejecting his community, he strips himself of any shield against the structures he idolizes. His only defense becomes obedience, and obedience keeps him poor. Isolation also damages perspective. Ruckus has no mirror to check his own delusion. He surrounds himself only with his own bitterness, so he grows more extreme. This mirrors the way financial isolation can distort reality. When people have no peers to compare strategies, no advisors to offer alternatives, and no community to share experiences, they normalize their own suffering. They convince themselves that struggle is natural, that debt is unavoidable, and that wealth is something other people have. Without exposure to collective wisdom, they repeat cycles that keep them broke. This is why solidarity is so dangerous to oppressive systems. When people unite, they discover patterns. They realize their problems are not personal failures, but structural barriers. They recognize that change is possible when numbers are on their side. That recognition builds power. But when people like Ruckus ridicule unity, the system is safe. His hostility toward his own community is more than comic. It is a sharp critique of how division starves the poor of their only real weapon: togetherness. Ruckus is a parody of disconnection, but he also reveals a truth that applies to real life. Poverty is not just the absence of money, but also the absence of collective strength. The lonelier a person is, the weaker their defense against exploitation becomes. And once someone learns to hate their own people, they become an agent of that loneliness, spreading division instead of solidarity. To make matters worse, nothing is scarier to Uncle Ruckus than transformation. He clings to his beliefs, even when they are disproven, rejects evidence that could free him, and mocks anyone who suggests a better way. This is the final chain: fear of change. Many people stay broke not because they lack ability, but because they cannot imagine life outside of what they already know. Familiar misery feels safer than unfamiliar opportunity. Ruckus embodies this fear so clearly that he becomes a living warning of what happens when someone refuses to evolve. In the series, Ruckus is given moments where he could face the truth about himself. A DNA test confirms his ancestry. His past reveals trauma that explains his broken worldview. Yet every time he is confronted with facts, he chooses denial. He would rather double down on delusion than rebuild his sense of self. That refusal mirrors financial life. People cling to old habits, even when those habits drain them. They fear new careers, new investments, or new communities because the risk of the unknown feels greater than the pain of staying stuck. Fear of change also feeds on excuses. Ruckus insists that life cannot improve, that his condition is permanent, that his chains are natural. Many people adopt the same reasoning. They say wealth is only for others. They believe their background disqualifies them. They convince themselves that trying would only lead to embarrassment. Excuses become shields against the discomfort of growth. But shields also block the very opportunities that could shift a person's future. Change requires vulnerability. To admit you want more means admitting that what you have is not enough. To step into new ground means risking rejection or failure. For people like Ruckus, that vulnerability feels unbearable. He avoids it by ridiculing change itself. He calls ambition foolish. He calls freedom dangerous. This is a reflection of how deeply people resist growth when they are terrified of being wrong about their own limitations. The tragedy of this mindset is that it ensures poverty continues. When people fear change, they never explore alternatives. They do not invest in new skills. They do not challenge unjust systems. And they do not build wealth outside of what they have been told is acceptable. The system doesn't even have to hold them down anymore. Their fear does the work. And so, like Ruckus, they live their entire lives in the comfort of chains, mocking anyone who dares to rattle them. Uncle Ruckus was written as satire, but the lessons hidden in his character go far beyond comedy. Every time someone convinces themselves they are unworthy, every time they defend systems that exploit them, every time they mock ambition, every time they cling to misery because it feels familiar, Ruckus is alive. He is a caricature, but he is also a mirror. The Boondocks uses him to shock us into laughter, but also into reflection. Poverty is not only about wages, inflation, or economics. It is also about psychology, belief, and identity. Without addressing those internal battles, no amount of external opportunity can create real change. Breaking poverty requires more than income. It requires breaking the stories that chain us. It requires refusing to glorify suffering. It requires uniting with your community rather than mocking it. And it requires courage to face change, even when it feels terrifying. These are the battles Ruckus refuses to fight, and that refusal leaves him stuck. For us, the choice remains open. His tragedy can serve as our warning. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to subscribe for more explorations into media, culture, and the hidden lessons buried inside the characters we know and love. Hit the like button if this gave you a new way to see Uncle Ruckus, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and let us know. What other characters should we break down next? We'll see you in the next video.